I'm Madeline Grace Whitmore, and the day I walked across the stage to receive my business degree, after 6 years of night classes, vending machine dinners, and sacrifices no one ever saw, I looked into the crowd and found 3 empty chairs. My parents and brother never came. They chose Super Bowl Sunday instead. That moment should have broken me. Instead, it opened my eyes. What followed was a journey I never planned to take. One that led from quiet betrayal to legal action, from silence to a TED Talk, and from being my family's invisible daughter to founding a national nonprofit for survivors of financial abuse. If you've ever been used by the people who claim to love you, if you've ever had to build boundaries no one taught you to make, this story is for you. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe, because sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply refusing to disappear. Row after row of black caps stretched across the auditorium of Silverfield University, the kind of sea that's supposed to feel triumphant. Cameras flashed, balloons bounced off high ceilings, families stood with armfuls of flowers, weeping into phone screens as names were called. But in the fourth row from the stage, 3 seats marked "Reserved Whitmore" remained untouched, empty. I stared at them long enough to memorize the curve of every fold in the velvet cushions. One for my mother, one for my father, one for my brother. Tyler. Gone. All of them. My phone vibrated inside my gown pocket. A group message glowed across the cracked screen. "Sorry, sweetheart. You know how Uncle Ray is about Super Bowl Sunday. Been his tradition for 20 years. We'll celebrate next weekend. XO." I clicked the screen dark, the air around me turning to static. 6 years of night classes, vending machine dinners, and secondhand textbooks rushed through my mind all at once. I gave up health insurance to pay for required accounting software, sold my Toyota, my only car, to cover the final semester, missed birthdays, declined every invitation, because I thought one day, standing here, it would all make sense. Madeline Grace Whitmore. The dean's voice cut through the noise as my row stood. I rose with them, feet moving in rhythm to the click of sensible black heels. Heels I found at a Goodwill in East Silverfield, marked down to $6. I clutched the sides of my gown to keep my hands from shaking. The stage lights caught the shimmer of the diploma cover as it passed from the dean's hands into mine. Bachelor of Business Administration. Summa cum laude. She smiled warmly. I tried to return it, but my lips felt frozen in place. My eyes drifted back to the empty chairs. My family had missed my community college graduation 3 years ago. 2. That time, it was car trouble. I believed them, until I saw the Instagram story Dad and Tyler grinning with hot wings in hand, Mom holding up her signature 7-layer dip, the same dip she used to make when I had straight A's in high school. I sat back down with the diploma clenched against my ribs, like armor. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur. Someone cried behind me when their cousin's name was called. A toddler wailed when the brass band kicked in. But I heard none of it. Then another text, this time from Dad. "We'll catch the next one. The next one." Like I would do this again. Like I would pour another 6 years into something just so they could skip it. 2. Outside. The February wind sliced through the open auditorium doors. I stood alone as other graduates fell into warm hugs and floral photo ops. My cap sat crooked on my head, one bobby pin already gone. I dialed my mom. She answered with an exaggerated brightness that made my stomach turn. I could hear the crowd noise in the background, the unmistakable rumble of pre-game analysis and snack bowls being passed. "How was it, sweetie?" I opened my mouth, but only one sentence came out. "How is walking across that stage and realizing no one who claims to love you thought it was worth showing up?" She sighed. "Don't be dramatic. Madeline, it's just a piece of paper." "No, It was 6 years. 6 years of building a future with no safety net. 6 years of believing that maybe, just maybe, if I achieved enough, I would matter enough. That's the moment something inside me fractured. 3 empty chairs had never said so much. The wind in Silverfield stung more than usual that afternoon. I sat on the cold concrete ledge just outside the auditorium, my gown still clinging to my skin where tears hadn't yet dried. A folded piece of paper, my diploma, rested against my thigh like a promise only I had kept. Behind me, families filled the parking lot with laughter and engine hums. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just stared down at my phone, still lit with the last message from my mother. Uncle Ray's been hosting Super Bowl Sunday for 20 years. You know that. We'll celebrate next weekend. Love you. It was written like a reminder, like I had forgotten to make room for tradition, like this day, my one day, wasn't worthy of rearranging chips and dip. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I wanted to reply with something that might make her understand. But how do you explain to someone that their absence hurt more than their presence ever healed? I didn't answer. Instead, I opened Facebook. It was supposed to be a distraction, just a scroll, something to keep the ache from closing in too tightly. But the first image I saw punched the air right out of my lungs. A sprawling table covered in snacks. Mini sliders, buffalo wings, that unmistakable glass dish, layered with refried beans and guacamole, Mom's 7-layer dip, centered perfectly in the shot. Uncle Ray's living room in the background, same as every year. But this time, with an audience of smiles I recognized too well. Dad, grinning in his lucky jersey, Tyler, tossing a football in the air, Mom, mid-laugh, holding a tray of nachos. The caption read, 20 years strong, happy Super Bowl Sunday, from the Whitmores. The timestamp, exactly 3:18 p.m. At the same moment, the dean had called my name. The exact second I walked across the stage, heart pounding, scanning the audience for a glimpse of someone, anyone, who came for me. I refreshed. Another photo. Tyler posed with a beer in one hand and a wad of betting slips in the other. Dropped 2K on the Rams. Let's go. That same brother who texted me just last month, begging for help to cover his car insurance. Just until Friday. He wrote, "You know I'd do the same for you." He never paid me back. Another scroll, a video, my mother, laughing, had her arm slung around Uncle Ray. The sound of roaring TV commentary in the background. I stared at the screen like it was lying to me, but it wasn't. There was no funeral, no accident, no last-minute emergency. There was just a football game, just a party, just a choice. And it wasn't me. My fingers trembled as I locked the screen and slipped the phone into my bag. My diploma still lay across my lap, oddly weightless now, like whatever meaning it held had been stripped by a tray of Super Bowl snacks and a well-angled Instagram post. It wasn't just that they didn't come, it was that they didn't care. I knew. No lies, no guilt, just indifference wrapped in glittery emojis. Somewhere deep inside me, something shifted. A weight I hadn't realized I was carrying gave way. They never planned to come. I don't even think they felt bad about it. The truth had been hiding in plain sight for years, under canceled visits, broken promises, and emergencies that always somehow coincided with Tyler's life getting easier and mine getting harder. But this time, they left evidence, public, cheerful, well-lit evidence. And for once, I didn't delete it. I saved the photos, screenshot the captions, saved the timestamps, not to throw it in their faces, but to remind myself what love isn't. Because this wasn't forgetfulness. This wasn't life happens. This was a choice. They chose snacks over sacrifice, a screen over my stage, a bet over their daughter. I stood up from the ledge slowly, wrapping my coat tightly around my gown. The last families were loading into cars, hugging tightly before heading to celebratory dinners. My breath clouded in the air as I whispered to no one. They never even looked for me. And for the first time since childhood, I believed it. The walk back to my apartment that night felt longer than usual. Silverfield's streets were quiet, lit by the kind of street lamps that flicker like they're deciding whether to burn out completely or keep going. I moved slowly, diploma tucked under my arm, phone silenced, heart heavier than the cap and gown combined. My building was the kind with peeling paint and neighbors who nodded but never said hello. I unlocked the door, kicked off my shoes, and dropped everything on the floor. I didn't bother turning on the light. I knew where the coffee table would be, where the sink would drip, where the rent reminder was taped to the fridge. Due Monday. I stood in the dark and thought about all the ways I'd been useful to them. Not loved, not cherished, just useful. The memories came back like snapshots. Mom, calling just after I'd gotten off a 12-hour shift at the insurance firm, sweetheart. Your dad and I are a little behind on the mortgage this month. Only $600. You're so good with money. Tyler, knocking on my apartment door with that sheepish smile he used when he wanted something Mads. I hate to ask, but I'm short on rent. Just $450. I'll pay you back on Friday. Promise. He didn't. Then came the loan for the family business idea Dad swore would change everything. Just co-sign. Honey, we're not asking for money. Just trust. We raised you. Didn't we? Yes. They raised me. But not to be independent. Not to be proud. They raised me to be available. Every holiday. Every call. Every moment I dared to say no was followed by silence or guilt. You're being selfish. Don't you care about your family? Tyler needs this. You don't understand the pressure he's under. No one ever asked what pressure I was under. No one ever wondered how I was paying for school, how I was affording rent, how I was making it through without collapsing. The truth is, I was collapsing. Just quietly enough that no one had to notice. I lived on black coffee and peanut butter crackers for weeks at a time, sold half my wardrobe to keep the lights on, gave up therapy, gave up birthday dinners, gave up breathing room, all while still answering the phone, still wiring the money, still saying, "Of course, I can help." Because that's what daughters do, right? That's what good daughters do. But standing in that apartment, alone in the dark, I started to realize something else. A daughter isn't a safety net. A daughter isn't a backup plan. And a daughter, no matter how responsible or smart with money, doesn't exist to clean up the messes of people who should have protected her. I opened my closet and stared at the row of work shirts I'd ironed for job interviews I took just to stay ahead. Interviews I never told them about because they never asked. They never asked if I was okay. They only asked if I was available. And for years, I said yes, because I thought that's what love looked like. But now I was starting to understand the difference between love and obligation, between family and responsibility, between guilt and generosity. And I was beginning to wonder if they had ever seen me as anything more than an ATM with a beating heart. The next morning, I didn't get out of bed right away. The sun had already crawled halfway up the blinds before I even moved. My phone buzzed twice, Mom's name, then Tyler's, and I let them ring out like distant alarms I no longer answered. My limbs felt heavy, like all the years I'd spent carrying other people's weight had finally settled into my bones. On the nightstand sat my graduation cap, slightly bent at the edges, tassel curled like it didn't want to straighten either. My diploma rested next to it, unframed, unopened. A reward, I suppose, for surviving a test no one else saw me take. I stared at the ceiling and thought, what would it look like? Just once. To do something only for myself, not out of guilt. Not to keep peace, not to be useful, just because I wanted to. My phone buzzed again. This time, I reached for it, not to answer, but to open an app I'd downloaded months ago and never used. Travel, flights, Willow Crest Retreat, a spa in the Colorado mountains with snow-dusted trees, heated stone massages, and silence so clean it echoed. I had bookmarked it during my third year of night classes, telling myself maybe after graduation, maybe someday, maybe when I was no longer needed every minute by someone else. But the thing about people who always need you is, they never decide you're no longer needed. You have to decide that for yourself. And so, I did. I picked the soonest one-way ticket I could afford. Monday morning, 7:20 a.m. I closed my eyes, felt the panic start to rise, and forced myself to breathe through it. This wasn't reckless. It wasn't dramatic. It was survival. Because if I stayed in that apartment, in that routine, in that cycle of giving until I vanished, I didn't know what would be left of me. I packed one suitcase, just essentials leggings, sweaters, a worn copy of a novel I'd reread every winter, and my laptop, still open to the job board page I hadn't had time to think about in months. I didn't tell anyone. No goodbye messages, no explanations, no permission. By Sunday night, I was staring at a printed confirmation email and a line that felt like prophecy. You're booked. A Mountain View suite awaits your arrival. I stood in the doorway of my apartment at 5:45 a.m. on Monday morning, one hand on the light switch. I looked back once, at the peeling paint, the stained carpet, the corners of myself I had slowly chipped away to keep others whole. Then I flicked the switch, and I left. The airport was quiet. I moved through security like someone walking through fog, numb, but present. My seat was by the window. Snow covered the runway. I pressed my forehead to the glass and whispered what felt like both a goodbye and a promise. This time, I'm not coming back smaller than I left. When the plane lifted off, my stomach dropped. But so did something heavier, the guilt, the constant second-guessing, the need to explain myself. Somewhere between Silverfield and the Rocky Mountains, I remembered how to breathe again. It wasn't selfish, it was necessary. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like someone's daughter, or someone's sister, or someone's last resort loan. I just felt like Madeline, and that, finally, was enough. Willow Crest was quiet, in a way few places ever are. Not silent, just peaceful. The kind of quiet that hums instead of echoes. Even the snowfall outside seemed softer, like it understood people came here to rest, not to run. By the second day, my shoulders had started to drop from their usual place around my ears. I ate real meals, slept for 9 uninterrupted hours, drank tea so hot and fragrant it made me forget vending machine coffee ever existed. That afternoon, I was lying on a heated massage table, warm stones tracing the length of my spine, when my phone buzzed from the side table. I ignored it at first. I had promised myself I'd stay disconnected. But when it buzzed again, and again, I reached over and checked. 3 messages from Archer. The first just said, "You need to check Credit Karma. Now." The second, "Something's off." The third held a screenshot. A hard inquiry from a bank I'd never applied to. Chase. A chill cut through the steam of the spa room. I sat up, suddenly aware of how exposed I felt in this peaceful place I had just started to trust. The massage therapist offered to step out. I nodded, wrapped in the thick robe provided by the retreat. I opened the app. 1 inquiry, then 2, then 5, Chase, Capital One, American Express, Macy's, a car dealership in Silverfield. All dated within the last month. All under my name. All without my consent. I scrolled through them like pages of a nightmare. My stomach flipped as realization struck. Not 1, not 2, but a pattern, a coordinated move. Someone had used my name, my social security number, my credit, and I already knew who. I opened my email and searched pre-approval. The pages of junk I had ignored now made sense. Then I checked my spam folder. And there it was. An auto loan application confirmation with the address listed as Douglas Whitmore. My father. I wasn't furious yet. Not quite. I was numb. I had given them so much over the years. Money, time, silence. And now they'd taken the one thing I had left. My future. Because that's what credit is. It's more than numbers. It's a possibility, stability, options. And they were burning it down behind my back. I FaceTimed Archer immediately. His face filled the screen, eyes already full of worry. I'm sorry, Mads. I didn't want to ruin your trip, but I knew you'd want to know. I nodded, too stunned to cry. Your mom's name popped up in one of the store card approvals. They're not even trying to hide it. I looked past the window to the mountains beyond. Beautiful, silent, unmoving. The opposite of everything happening to me now. They didn't even ask. I whispered. No, Archer said quietly. They never do. I closed the laptop and stared at the stones still warming in the basket nearby. Just minutes ago, those stones had melted tension I didn't know I carried. Now, I wanted to throw them through the glass. I wasn't just a daughter. I wasn't just a safety net. Now, I was a name on a loan application. And I hadn't signed a single thing. Something inside me snapped into place. Not rage, not revenge. Resolve. They had drawn the line. And this time, I was going to draw one of my own. The phone felt heavier than usual in my hand. I sat on the balcony of my suite at Willow Crest, wrapped in a fleece throw, the mountain air biting at my cheeks. Snow drifted lazily past the railing, each flake landing without sound. But inside me, nothing was quiet. I had spent the last hour reviewing credit inquiries, scanning loan application confirmations, and highlighting addresses that weren't mine, but were unmistakably familiar. The final piece clicked when I saw the Macy's card. The billing address. My parents' house. I didn't need more proof. I already had more than I wanted. But there was one thing left I needed to do. Say it out loud. Not for them. For me. I tapped the call button. It rang once. Then twice. Then, "Hi, honey," Mom answered, her voice syrupy sweet, like she'd been waiting for a casual check-in. "How's your little trip?" "Little, I need to ask you something," I said, my voice flat, steady. "Okay. Did you open any credit cards in my name?" A beat of silence, then laughter. Nervous, forced. "What, no? Of course not. Why would we do that? I have your address listed on multiple applications," I said. "I have your name tied to a Macy's card. I have bank inquiries, car loans, store accounts, all opened in the last few weeks." More silence. Then came the deflection. "Oh, Maddie, you know how those things work. Sometimes they just send offers. You probably clicked something online without realizing it." I closed my eyes. "I didn't apply for anything." She sighed. "Well, even if someone did, I'm sure it's not that big of a deal. You've always been so good with money. You can fix it." And just like that, the switch flipped. The soft voice hardened, defensive, dismissive. "You're blowing this out of proportion," she added. "Don't be dramatic." That phrase again. Don't be dramatic. Even now, even after stealing my name, my trust, my future. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I'm not calling to ask," I said. "I'm calling to tell you. I know what you did. And I'm not staying quiet about it." "Oh, come on. We're family. Families help each other." "No," I said. "Families ask. Families respect boundaries. Families don't steal identities just because they think they can get away with it." In the background, I heard Dad's voice grow louder. Is that Madeline? Tell her I need to talk to her about the loan. Don't, I said, my voice slicing through the phone like frost. Don't ask me for one more thing. Madeline, you're being selfish. There it was. The old refrain, the guilt script, the worn-out, reheated manipulation. But it didn't work this time. Because this time, I wasn't the girl who answered every call. I wasn't the girl who sent money I didn't have just to feel needed. I wasn't the daughter they could borrow without permission. I was the woman who finally saw the truth. I pulled the phone away from my ear, staring at their contact name. A photo of Mom smiling at Thanksgiving years ago still filled the screen. A smile I used to chase. My thumb hovered over the red button. End call. Then I went one step further. Block contact. A small gray pop-up asked if I was sure. I was. I tapped yes. And just like that, the line went quiet. Not the quiet of absence, the quiet of freedom. The silence after the block button was a strange kind of quiet. Not peaceful, but clean, like a fresh sheet of snow. Untouched. No calls, no guilt, no sudden demands disguised as love. For the first time in my life, the line between me and them was not just emotional. It was digital, deliberate, and firm. But silence doesn't solve theft. It doesn't rebuild credit or erase the inquiries stacked like bruises across my financial history. Blocking them didn't undo the damage. It just meant they couldn't do more of it, at least not from the same phone. I sat at the corner desk in my suite, the glow of my laptop reflecting back a woman I was still getting used to seeing. Tired, sharper, not angry, but awake. My hand hovered over the keyboard as I typed the name Archer had mentioned 3 days earlier. Dr. Meredith Holloway, JD, LLM, specialist in identity theft, family-based financial abuse. Her website was plain, just a slate gray background, a quiet serif font, and a sentence that stopped me mid-scroll. Sometimes the people who should protect you are the ones who exploit you. I didn't hesitate. I filled out the consultation form. By the next morning, she had replied. We spoke via secure video call just after sunrise, the Rocky Mountains turning gold outside my window. Dr. Holloway looked nothing like the attorneys I'd imagined. No stiff suit, no cold voice. She wore a soft cardigan, glasses perched low, and had a calmness that felt more like a therapist than a lawyer. I told her everything, not all at once, but in pieces. The graduation, the Super Bowl party, the unpaid loans, the store cards, the auto inquiries, the quiet years of giving more than I had. She didn't interrupt. She didn't flinch. When I finally said the words, it was my parents, my brother too. I waited for the look, the silent judgment, the polite disbelief. But it never came. Instead, she said, that's more common than you think. And it's not your fault. I nodded, though I didn't fully believe her. Yet, we got to work. I forwarded bank statements, screenshots, emails, texts I'd saved, even when they hurt to read. Archer helped pull my credit report into chronological spreadsheets. I found receipts, old Venmo logs, even a voicemail from Tyler saying, just send it from your account. You know I can't open another card. Dr. Holloway organized it all into folders. One for evidence, one for potential charges, one for cease and desist letters we'd send once everything was in place. This isn't revenge, she reminded me gently. This is reclamation. Of your name, of your power, of your future. And I needed that. I needed to hear that this wasn't about punishing them. It was about protecting me. Because here's the truth. No one likes to say out loud sometimes you don't go to war because you want to. You go because survival demands it. Over the next week, between massages and mountain walks, I sat with spreadsheets instead of silence. I documented everything, every withdrawal, every forged signature, every little favor that turned into a financial wound. It was exhausting, but it was also, oddly, cleansing, like building a case for the person I used to be, the one who gave too much, but never stopped hoping she'd be seen. Dr. Holloway sent me the draft of the first letter to Douglas and Catherine Whitmore, a formal request to cease all financial activity using my identity, a warning of pending legal action, a statement of boundaries, this time backed by law. I signed it with hands that didn't shake. The law had always felt like something distant to me, something cold. But now, it felt like armor. Not a sword, but a shield. I wasn't hiding anymore, and I wasn't asking. I was claiming what had always been mine. My name, my credit, my life. It happened the night I got back to Silverfield. I had just stepped into my apartment after a week at Willow Crest, suitcase wheels still warm from the airport shuttle. The place looked smaller than I remembered, dimmer, but it was mine. The cease and desist letter had gone out 2 days earlier. Certified mail, signed for, confirmed. Dr. Holloway warned me. Sometimes the reaction to boundaries is worse than the original betrayal. I didn't expect it to come this fast. At 3:07 a.m., I woke to the sound of fists slamming against my door. Not knocking, slamming. I sat up, heart racing, unsure if I was still dreaming. Then I heard it. Madeline. Open this door right now. My father's voice, low and forceful. I froze. Then came Mom's voice, shaky but loud enough to carry through the walls. Please, sweetheart, just let us in. We need to talk. Like a family. I moved quietly to the door and looked through the peephole. There they were, Catherine and Douglas Whitmore, my parents, still dressed in coats, faces tight with fury wrapped in concern, and leaning against the hallway wall, arms folded, phone camera aimed at the door. Tyler. My breath caught in my throat. They had never visited my apartment before, not once in 6 years. Not when I was sick, not when the power got cut, not even when I graduated from community college. But now, after I dared to say no, after I sent a legal document instead of a check, now they showed up. The banging started again. We need to get our things, Dad yelled. We left property in there. Let us in or we're calling the landlord. I backed away from the door slowly, each step deliberate. My phone was already in my hand. I dialed. Miss Whitmore, my landlord, answered. Groggy. I'm so sorry for the hour, but my family is at my door. They're demanding entry to retrieve property that doesn't exist. A pause. Then, should I call the police? Yes, I whispered. Please. I set the phone down and waited. They kept yelling. Tyler raised his voice for the first time. You think you're better than us now? Just because you have a little money and a degree. You owe us. I didn't respond. I didn't open the door. And most importantly, I didn't flinch. Because the truth was, I had opened doors for them my whole life. Financial doors. Emotional ones. Doors that cost me years. And they'd walked through every one like they were entitled. But not this one. Not anymore. Sirens approached in the distance. Flashing lights painted red and blue across my window panes. Then came the knock. This one calm. Official. Silverfield PD. Ma'am, are you safe inside? I opened the door a crack and nodded. Yes. They're out there. The next few minutes were a blur. Officers spoke with my parents. Tyler tried to talk over everyone. But it didn't matter. I had paperwork. I had a signed letter. I had legal standing. They were ordered to leave. As they were escorted down the hall, my mother turned and cried out, Madeline, how could you do this to us? After everything we've done for you. I didn't answer, because I had already said everything that needed to be said by mailing that letter, by closing that door, by choosing not to open it again. And as the hallway grew quiet and the flashing lights faded into the night, I sat on the floor just inside my apartment, not afraid, not guilty, just still, for the first time in years. I didn't feel like I had to defend myself. I had nothing to prove, only peace to protect. The courthouse in downtown Silverfield was older than I expected. Stained glass above the double doors, marble worn thin beneath years of footsteps, and a faint smell of paper and polish that settled into your skin the moment you walked in. I clutched my file folder like a shield. Inside it, 6 years of my life in receipts, bank statements, screenshots, and silence turned into evidence. Dr. Holloway met me at the security checkpoint. She didn't say much. She didn't have to. Her presence alone was steadying. I wasn't walking in as a daughter desperate to be understood. I was walking in as a plaintiff, calm, prepared, resolved. In courtroom 3B, I took a seat beside her. Across the aisle, my parents sat stiffly behind their attorney, who looked as if he'd only recently realized what kind of case he'd taken. Tyler slouched at the end of the bench, scrolling his phone like this was an inconvenience, not a reckoning. The judge entered, a woman with a sharp gaze and a voice that demanded clarity. She opened the session with routine formalities. Then she turned her attention to me. "Miss Whitmore, your counsel may begin." Dr. Holloway stood, composed. She moved with the ease of someone who had done this 100 times but still cared about every single one. She laid out the timeline: the stolen identity, the unauthorized credit cards, the car loan applications. Then came the emails, screenshots where my mother said, "It's not a big deal. You're good with money." The Venmo transactions Tyler labeled "Thanks sis" after draining my rent fund. The recorded voicemail from my father. "It's just a signature. Maddie, you know we'd do the same for you." And then she opened the folder. The courtroom projector flickered to life. Line by line, transaction by transaction, my life was laid bare, not for pity, not for vengeance, but for justice. No theatrics, no shouting, just the truth. When it was time for their attorney to respond, he stumbled through half-hearted explanations, claimed miscommunication, suggested I had misunderstood the nature of the family's financial dynamics. The judge didn't flinch. "Did you obtain her permission to open these accounts?" she asked. He faltered. There was an assumption of mutual support. Her gavel came down like punctuation. "This court does not operate on assumption, especially when assumptions result in financial harm, stolen credit, and long-term damage." She turned to my parents, then to Tyler. "What I see here is not support. It's exploitation disguised as family loyalty." I watched their faces for any flicker of shame. There was some on my mother's face. Not sorrow, not regret, just the realization that this time, they weren't in control. The judge issued the ruling clearly, without hesitation. A permanent restraining order is granted. No further financial activity may be conducted under the name of Madeline Grace Whitmore. Any future contact must go through her legal representation. It was done, not loudly, not dramatically, but definitively. We exited the courthouse into the gray afternoon light. The cold didn't sting the same way it used to. My fingers, gripping the copy of the court order, felt grounded, like they finally held something solid. Behind me, I heard Dr. Holloway speak softly. "They're no longer the storytellers here. You are." And she was right. For the first time, I wasn't explaining myself. I wasn't pleading to be seen. The facts had spoken, and the court had listened. My family could no longer rewrite the past or reshape the truth. Not with their voices, and not with mine either. Because I had something stronger now. Proof. The train ride to Hawthorne Ridge was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that echoes with what you've lost, but the kind that makes space for what comes next. I sat by the window, watching pine trees flicker past in streaks of green and gold. A fresh start, not just in geography but in identity. For the first time in my life, I was leaving not to escape, but to build. 2 weeks had passed since the court ruling. The cease and desist order had held, the credit inquiries were frozen, and my inbox, once flooded with demands and guilt-laced messages, had gone still. In that stillness, something new had taken root. A job offer. A real one. Director of Financial Wellness and Risk Strategy at Redwood Mutual, based in Hawthorne Ridge. Full benefits, six-figure salary, remote options. A team that had found me, not through a referral, not through family, but through the LinkedIn post I wrote after the hearing. When family becomes the source of financial abuse, we don't just need laws, we need voices. That post had gone viral. Tens of thousands of comments. People sharing stories they'd buried for years. Sisters, daughters, even sons. Messages that began with, "I thought I was the only one." The team at Redwood reached out within days. They weren't just hiring me for my credentials. They wanted my story, my clarity, my voice. And I knew if I was going to take that role, I had to do more than rebuild. I had to reach back. That's how Second Chances was born. It started as a series of weekend workshops, free sessions for young adults who had been financially manipulated by family. We taught them how to read credit reports, how to freeze compromised accounts, how to write boundary-setting letters that didn't ask permission. We partnered with trauma counselors, identity theft experts, and employment advocates. By the third month, we had enough demand to turn it into a nonprofit. The paperwork felt heavier than my diploma had that day, but this time, I didn't carry it alone. Archer helped manage logistics. Dr. Holloway joined the board, and our first volunteer was a girl named Tessa, 21, evicted by her parents after refusing to co-sign a loan. I'll never forget the way her hands shook when she held her first debit card tied to her own name. "Is this what it feels like?" she asked. "To belong to yourself," I said. "Yeah, it is." My apartment in Hawthorne Ridge was small but bright. A studio above a bookstore that smelled like coffee and cedarwood. The landlord, an older woman named Denise, left a welcome basket on my kitchen counter. Inside was a note. "We're glad you're here. No questions, no expectations, just roots. If you want them." Every Tuesday, I hosted a support group in the community library. We filled the room with folding chairs and hard truths. People cried, people laughed, and slowly, they healed. At Redwood, I became known for more than just strategy. I became the one people called when they didn't know how to say no to the people who raised them. My office had a sign taped to the wall. It wasn't fancy. Just a sentence typed in 14-point font: "Love should never require silence or debt." It reminded me daily why I was here. Hawthorne Ridge became more than a location. It became a landscape I could grow in, where the phone calls didn't come with strings, where no one showed up at my door demanding what they believed they were owed, where I could walk into a room and not brace for someone to say, "After all we've done for you." Because here, I wasn't someone's safety net. I wasn't someone's scapegoat. I was Madeline Grace Whitmore, and I was finally, undeniably, the author of my own life. The ballroom at the Cascade Business Summit was filled with warm lights and quiet anticipation. Rows of executives, entrepreneurs, and nonprofit founders sat poised, programs folded neatly in their laps. I stood just off stage, mic clipped to my lapel, heartbeat steady beneath the navy blazer I'd bought after my first paycheck at Redwood Mutual. The emerald pin at my collar, gifted by the Second Chances board, caught the spotlight as I stepped into position. Behind me, the screen displayed my name, Madeline Grace Whitmore, Financial Independence and Family Boundaries in the Age of Exploitation. I took a breath, smiled at the moderator, and stepped forward. But I didn't get the first word. Not this time. Because the ballroom doors swung open with a bang that made half the audience turn. My father's voice, louder than any mic, boomed through the hall. There she is. Our daughter. The one who abandoned her own family. Gasps scattered like dropped pins. Phones lifted. Security began moving, but slowly, uncertain whether this was disruption or drama. Then came my mother, clutching her purse and her chest with equal theatrical precision. We raised her, paid her way through life, and this is how she thanks us. Tyler followed behind them. Of course. Filming the entire thing. Phone held high like it was his golden ticket to sympathy or clicks. His expression was smug. Ready, I didn't move, didn't flinch. I looked out at the sea of eyes, watching, wondering. Then I did the only thing I knew how to do. I stepped to the mic. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, calm and clear. What you're witnessing right now is exactly why I do the work I do. Security reached my family just as I lifted my hand and addressed the room. Sometimes, I continued, the people we're told to love are the very ones who teach us that love means sacrifice, silence, and debt. This isn't an interruption. This is the lesson. Mom sobbed louder. Dad reached the stage. Tyler shouted something about slander. I didn't stop. I turned slightly toward security and said, they are in violation of a court order. Please escort them out. And just like that, it was over. Phones recorded every second as they were led from the room. Dad shouting about betrayal, Mom stumbling behind him, Tyler still filming like the ending would somehow redeem the footage. But the audience, they didn't look away from me. They leaned in. Because they understood now that I hadn't just come to talk about finances. I'd come to talk about freedom. I was going to speak today about investment strategies. I said as calm returned. But I think there's something more urgent. The slides behind me changed. Photos from the Second Chances workshops. Faces of young adults standing tall with their own debit cards. A whiteboard filled with the words, "Boundaries are not betrayal." I told them everything. About the graduation, the Super Bowl party, the credit theft, the cease and desist letter, the 3 a.m. knocking, and how, in a moment like this, I used to shrink. Not anymore. The ballroom was silent when I finished. Then someone in the back stood, then another. Then applause swelled through the room like a wave. After the event, publishers lined up. One placed a card in my hand. Penguin Random House. We want this story. But the real moment came in the lobby, as I packed my notes. A girl, no older than 20, with a tight bun and eyes that shimmered with something familiar, stepped forward. You just told my story, she whispered. And I didn't know anyone else had one like mine. I took her hand gently. That's the thing about silence. It always feels personal, until someone breaks it. And today, I had, not just for me, but for every voice still waiting for permission to speak. The late afternoon sun spilled through the tall windows of my office in Hawthorne Ridge, casting golden lines across the polished floor. On the far wall, a gallery of frames stretched from ceiling to desk, some new, some weathered by time, all chosen with care. The first frame held a photograph of 3 empty chairs. Fourth row. Silverfield University Auditorium. Taken by a classmate who thought she was doing me a favor. Back then, it felt like proof of absence. Now, it stood as a marker of everything I survived. Next to it, the court documents, restraining order, credit recovery confirmation, the cease and desist letter with my signature, bold and steady, framed not as trophies, but as reminders truth isn't always loud, but it endures. Beside them, something newer. A photo from the Cascade Summit. A packed ballroom. I'm at the podium, mid-sentence, hand extended not in defense, but in clarity. Behind me, the words, "Freedom isn't betrayal, it's permission." A few inches down, the first cohort of Second Chances scholars. 6 young women and 2 young men, holding their acceptance letters like shields. Behind them, the banner we made out of scrap vinyl and hope. It read, "You are not what they took from you." And then, one more. A letter. Typed, folded once, tucked into a soft blue envelope. Dear Madeline, I used to think survival meant keeping quiet. Thank you for showing me that voice is the beginning of healing. I started over because you did first. Thank you for showing me what's possible. Signed, no last name, just Jasmine. I keep that letter in the center frame. Not because it flatters me, but it grounds me. This journey was never just about reclaiming what was stolen. It was about becoming someone I had never been allowed to be. Not the quiet daughter, not the fallback plan, not the human ATM, but a woman who built something lasting from the rubble. Outside my window, the city moved softly. Cars, people, lives intersecting like threads. My inbox pinged once a message from my TED Talk coordinator. Another a financial abuse caseworker requesting a meeting. I smiled. I will answer them soon. But not yet. Because in that moment, surrounded by proof that I was never invisible, I let myself be still. Not to disappear, but to honor what it means to be seen on your own terms. Freedom, I've learned, isn't the end of the story. It's the door to the life that comes next. And I'm walking through it. Not alone, not quietly, but fully, completely,